Good morning all, welcome to Going to Ground. Have you ever had the feeling that you were being watched? Well, John Berger began his groundbreaking series and book, Ways of Seeing, with the insight that our first perception is an awareness not that we can see, but that we are seen. And that awareness of the infant child is seen usually by their mother, that bond immediately, that you are first aware that you are watched, is the key, of course, as we know, to childhood security, our sense of who we are. It is not firstly that what we see, but that we see that we are seen, if that makes sense. Certainly out in the countryside, first thing in the morning, I've become much more aware that creatures see me before I see them. Pheasants scutter up from the bushes as I walk past. They spotted me coming. Deer, 100 yards away, suddenly take flight, having held still for a while when they see me. Before I see them, usually the first time I see the creatures around me in the fields, I sound like St. Francis, the birds settle on my arms, is when they're running away. They've spotted me. The hares or the pheasants or whatever it is have seen me, and they are then making off, and I notice that they noticed me. One of the taxing things I think about meetings on Zoom or Skype at the moment is that the usual ways of seeing each other are suspended or do not pertain in when you've got a screen full of people, all of them looking at their screen or their lens, like I'm looking at this lens to look at you. They're all looking back at you constantly. And that's why Zoom meetings get pretty tiring, because you feel under this intense gaze, even though everybody's not actually looking at just you all the time. It feels like that. And that's too much for us. Of course, in the Bible, it's really basic to our understanding of God that like a child before their infant mother, we are beheld, that God sees us before we see him, and whether or not we realise, that line from Jesus about not a sparrow falls out of the sky, but that the Father sees it, or that without your Father being aware of it, your Father in heaven. And in the Psalms, there's that majestic description of God's foreknowledge of us in Psalm 139 that many of you will have come across before, where King David, who writes the psalm, says, "O Lord, you have searched me and know me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from far away. You search out my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, O Lord, you know it completely. You hem me in, behind and before. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me." It's interesting that line, it almost gets a little bit uneasy, doesn't it? And throughout the scriptures, there are occasions where the fact that God sees us is really, really uncomfortable. I mean, think of the Garden of Eden. God's call to Adam and Eve, "Where are you?" And they're terrified, and they cover themselves up, and we know how the story goes. Think of Jonah, who tries to escape the kind of gaze of God and escapes, tries to go sort of flee from him by sea, and then realizes as he winds up on the shore at Nineveh, he can't do that, and he's reconciled to the fact that God sees him. So whilst it makes us uneasy to think that somebody is constantly gazing at us, that can be off-putting within seconds. What we do know that we need is to be noticed, remembered, not overlooked, valued and understood. And that is, I think, the nature of God's beholding of us. And it is basic to our security to know that we have not been forgotten, that we are seen in that way. So my prayer today is, whoever's looking at you from your screen, and whatever you notice, and our attention at the moment settles on things in a new way, whatever you notice, may you know that you are noticed and remembered by God, that he sees and that he is with us. God bless you as you go to ground.